Where are the energy solutions of tomorrow a reality today? Which country is investing £2.5 billion into clean growth innovation and leading the world in offshore wind? We're the UK and we're ready to trade with you.
Did you know that closing the gender gap of Sri Lanka's workforce could raise our GDP by 20%? And yet, women's labour force participation is stubbornly low. The She Works Sri Lanka partnership brings together 16 companies committed to increasing equal opportunities for men and women, boosting business productivity and growth. We are convinced that collaboration across businesses and sectors can bridge the gender gap.
Welcome to you all. I'm Arjuna Nanayakkara from Council for Business with Britain. We are here today to yet again start an exciting session, which is the third iteration on diversity and inclusion. Today, we are going to talk about how organizations can learn strategies and achieve benefits by having an eminent panel here. With a moderator, and I'm going to introduce them in a few minutes. We are organizing this series with a gender as the key topic, and slowly we would move on to diversity as a broader topic, because that is not an option for corporate sector anymore. And we have seen with research and years and years of investment by corporate sector that a diverse organization brings more results, it is more sustainable, and it is ready to shaping for the new challenges that the world is facing. So without taking any more time, I would like to introduce our panel, a world-class panel we have today, and that's followed by Lord Davis and industry sector leaders who joined our panels in the previous sessions, and we are continuing that trend. I would like to first introduce Sarah Twigg, Program Manager for IFC, and she has done a lot of work to ensure that women are empowered and they are given adequate capabilities to develop their skills, both men and women, and they are given access to finance, and as an initiative that that IFC supports diversity and inclusion as their programs in the world and in Sri Lanka. Then I would like to introduce, I hope I got your name properly, Ananya. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce this properly. Sabarwal, right? She's the country HR director for Unilever. She's got world-class experience in many fields in HR. She has transformed the organization in many parts of the world. And we all know that Unilever is actively involved in diversity and inclusion. And they've gone to the grassroots of the industry and made a difference. And she's here with us on the panel to ensure that we get exposure on the experience and how we can enlighten you all today. And then we've got Swarthi Kandaya. She's from Demos, and she comes with a very broad HR experience, and she has worked in the engineering and the manufacturing sectors of DEMOS, which is a conglomerate in the country. And she has actively participated in many diversity and inclusion forums in the world, globally recognized, and she's bringing that experience into our panel today. And our moderator is Tanuja Jayawardena. She's a practicing lawyer, and she has joined MAS later on and done various initiatives in MAS to bring MAS to what it is, with a flavor of diversity and inclusion and gender equality. And she's bringing that experience into this forum today to moderate the session for us. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and coming over to share your experiences. I think we'll have a wonderful discussion going forward. Before I hand over to our next speaker, there's going to be a very interesting poll which we will conduct in the middle of the session. Now, this is really to get your feedback on your opinion on diversity and inclusion and how we can use it in the panel as an active discussion and tailoring some of the aspects that we would like to discuss in questions and answers. So do take part in it and give us some clues on what you think about diversity and inclusion. So with that, what we will do is we'll hand the session to Linda, who is the head of the diversity and inclusion pillar of CBB. She's going to speak to you about and introduce her experience and expertise and welcome you all. And then later on, Tanuja will take over the discussions and move ahead of the agenda. Over to you, Linda.
Welcome to the Council for Business with Britain's third webinar in a series about diversity and inclusion, focusing on gender. In our very first webinar in August, we heard from UK's Trade Envoy Lord Davies about his experiences and work in the field. The second webinar gave us more local insight from key leaders across various industries who strongly support diversity and inclusion in their respective companies. All male, these leaders showed the importance of being a strong ally for the benefit of your company. It is now time to dive into understanding the actions that result in measurable advancement. Moderator of today, Tanuja Jayawardena, is a powerhouse in this field herself. As GM for Women's Empowerment, Advocacy and Code of Conduct at MAS Holdings, she has done groundbreaking work in the field. She will speak today with experts Sarah Twigg, Program Manager of Women in Work Sri Lanka at IFC, the International Finance Corporation, Ananya Sabharwal, Country Director, Unilever Sri Lanka, and Swati Kandia, Assistant Manager, Employer Branding, Diversity and Inclusion at Diesel and Motor Engineering, or DEMO. I wish you all an inspiring afternoon.
Hi, everyone. I believe we're going into the poll right now. Right. So I think I'm going to jump right in with that poll, I think, being done. Are we able to maybe start the conversation? Okay. Am I audible? Sarah, Swati, can everyone hear me? All good? Thanks. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for this conversation. And taking on from that introduction from Arjuna and Linda, if I might set a little bit more context to the conversation today, the reason for selecting a focused approach towards women in the workplace for this network was as we look at our global population, with more than 50% of the population of the world being female, the gender gap in our workplaces and of course in leadership and management roles is an obvious one. So for the CDB network also, it felt like an obvious choice to take this as the first phase of our focus, looking at the next few months, moving into other types of underrepresented groups. If we look at, of course, representation in the labor force, as you saw in the poll, I think majority of you were right. It is actually 35% or a little less in Sri Lanka. And of course, globally, if we look at the Fortune 500 companies, we have a little less than 8% female representation as CEOs. And the World Economic Forum report for 2020 says that it will take us 99.5 years to bridge the gender gap. So I think this conversation is timely. And if I might start with Sarah, Sarah Twigg, lovely to have you as always. And I'll start my questions with you. Sarah, IFC has found it to be strategic to focus on work relating to women in the workplace. And you have headed many programs in this space in different parts of the world. Could you share with us a little bit about why IFC finds it necessary to have focused programming for supporting women in the workplace and also women in leadership?
Sure, thanks Tanuja, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, also with this very esteemed panel. So absolutely, I mean, for IFC, gender equality is a priority. It's part of our DNA. I think from our perspective, gender equality is an essential part of economic growth and development, and no country is going to meet their development objectives, particularly in the COVID world and in the 21st century, without the full and equal participation of both women and men. So for us, it's really a no-brainer. For us, it's part of our strategy, and it's core to achieving the World Bank Group's twin goals of boosting shared prosperity and ending poverty, ending extreme poverty. So we have a World Bank Group gender strategy that cuts across everything that we do, and all of our investments, all of our advisory has a gender lens to what we do. In Sri Lanka, we're very lucky. We have IFC's largest standalone gender program anywhere in the world. It's called Women in Work, and it's a partnership with the Government of Australia, running for 5.5 years. In the context of Sri Lanka, we're focused on closing gaps across the private sector. So we're looking not only at employment and women's leadership in the corporate world, but we're also looking at how the private sector can help increase access to finance, financial services, non-financial services, and also the role of the private sector in supporting women business owners. So lead firms bringing women businesses into their supply chains, for example. So our program cuts across all of those areas. Thinking specifically about employment and why is employment so important, and why is it such a big part of the work we're doing in Sri Lanka. So we've talked about in the poll that, you know, women's labour force participation has been at around 1/3 for the last 10 years and has actually been declining. So there's a really significant challenge there. And then this contrasts with the very, very high education levels of women in this country. So that means that employers are leaving a huge potential talent pool untapped. And that's particularly critical in the context of labour shortages, which we are increasingly seeing in the context of COVID, and firms not being able to hire the talent that they need. So through our work on employment in Sri Lanka, we're working with firms to help them maximize their existing female talent pool and help them to recruit more women. And we're doing that by helping them to understand and tackle the particular challenges that women face when it comes to employment. So thinking about things like childcare, thinking about things like flexible work. And what we've seen is that when companies do this, it's good for their bottom line and it helps to improve business outcomes. We're also working on addressing women's leadership. So we have a partnership with the Colombo Stock Exchange, and we're working with them to increase the share of women on boards of listed companies as a, sort of setting the standard. And there are some targets that will be coming in terms of the share of women that have to be on those boards. And then working with other partners like the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, Women in Management and others to make sure that there are women who are ready to take on those board roles. So it's not just about having opportunities for women, it's about making sure that they're ready to be there. And so all of this obviously is important for women themselves. It has a huge impact on their families, on the communities in which they live, but it also fundamentally improves business productivity and improves business bottom line. So we really see this as fundamental to building a productive and a resilient private sector.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah, you touched on this a little bit in what you just said, but if I could ask you, the question we get quite often about why do we need to actively step in and actively intervene if companies are not blocking women from joining us or being promoted? Will this not happen organically? You touched on this a little bit when you spoke of some of the work that is necessary, but could you share a little more on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. And so maybe just to reflect a little bit on where we are right now. So obviously we've talked about the female labour force participation. We also see that women of childbearing age and child-rearing age, so between the ages of 20 and 40, are the most disadvantaged group. So they hold only about 30% of jobs in the private sector. They're significantly less likely to be working than females in other age groups. We also see, though, that there's a huge economic benefit to Sri Lanka as a whole to addressing these gaps. So the closing the gender gap could boost GDP by about 20%. So now more than ever, that's something that the country really, really needs. And then, as I touched on, at the company level, we see, study after study which shows the business benefits from doing this. So there was a recent ILO study where they looked at 13,000 organisations. And they found that those that had higher gender equality also had increased profits and higher productivity. So there's a very clear correlation there between, your gender balance and your business outcomes. Similarly, when we look at women in leadership positions, in Sri Lanka right now, fewer than 1 in 10 boards of listed companies, board directors of listed companies are women. So very, very low proportion of women on those boards. And yet we see that when companies do have more diverse boards and more diverse leadership teams, they have increased profits. They also have improved environmental and social outcomes. So we're about to release a report looking at the top 30 companies on the stock exchange. And what we've found is that the companies in that group that have higher gender diversity on their boards also have better financial returns. So again, a clear correlation between having women in those roles and your business performance. But so why is it not happening? If there are all these benefits and if there are all these gaps, why is it not just happening organically? So there are really a number of barriers that limit women's participation and their access to jobs and their ability to retain those jobs when they get them. And most of these can't be easily overcome without some conscious and concerted effort. So things like disproportionate household and care responsibilities, which by and large fall on women. There are a number of legal barriers that still exist in Sri Lanka to women's labour force participation. This includes things like the restrictions on women working in night hours, restrictions on certain industries or certain jobs that women can hold. We also see challenges around transportation, so getting to and from work. If it's, many women can't access safe or reliable transport, which again is a major barrier to them accessing that paid employment. And then when women are at work, we also see challenges around harassment and disrespectful behaviour towards women. This is something that affects everyone, but it affects women disproportionately. And then underpinning all of that, we have social norms and unconscious bias. And this affects the way that we all think about women's and men's roles in the household, in the community, as well as in the workplace. And so non-discrimination policies are a really important starting point, and we need to have those because they're a good signal of where the company's position is and what their stand is. But they're not alone going to change these behaviours and these entrenched business practices. So really, when we're talking about creating more opportunities for women in the private sector, what we mean is it's about levelling the playing field. It's about giving women equal opportunities to participate and to thrive in the same way as men. And to do this, we need to tackle some of those barriers and we need to actually address some of those challenges. So we've been working with companies to do things like address the childcare responsibilities of women, putting in place family-friendly policies and practices, providing access to high-quality childcare services that both mothers and fathers can access, and encouraging men to play a more active role in household and childcare responsibilities, which gives women that opportunity to participate more equally. We're also working with companies to create more respectful workplaces, which of course benefits everyone, but really addressing some of these behaviours that can make it difficult for women to be at work and to stay employed. Equally, tackling unconscious bias is a really critical one, and we see lots of companies doing this, for example, in their recruitment practices. By having gender-blind recruitment processes, having both women and men on the hiring panel. So there are a number of proactive steps that companies can take to remove some of those biases that we all have. And then also things like making sure that you're consciously giving women access to career critical assignments, making sure they're getting access to the specific types of trainings that they need to be ready to take on those leadership roles. We know, for example, women often lack confidence, and often there are gaps for women in terms of their ability to speak up in meetings and to make themselves heard. So giving women specific training to help build some of those skills is also a really fundamental part of helping to address some of these challenges.
Thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful. So much that we can take away from that. You just kind of listed out things that most of us on the call can start doing. And I do want to say, as MS Holdings, being part of the She Works network that IFC drove for 2 years, a lot of this. So it's work that we had been doing for a while, but being part of a network of private companies in Sri Lanka, holding ourselves accountable, driving these different interventions, like you said, whether it's childcare, whether it is tackling unconscious biases, and a really interesting thing you said about identifying roles and assignments that we can give women or should be giving women to make sure that they get the necessary exposure and development that they need to take on leadership roles. So a lot of that was really helpful for us also as a company because we held ourselves accountable. There was also this thing of setting targets, measuring ourselves, looking at all these different interventions, which made a lot of sense, being part of a framework and a network. Sarah, so I'm going to come back to you with a few more questions once I've spoken with the other two panelists. Lots more to ask you. Hopefully we'll get to connect with you again in the next few minutes. Thanks, Sarah. If I were to move on to Ananya. Ananya, thank you so much for being here. It's lovely to have you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Ananya, so I'm very, very interested to be speaking to you. And I think all of us will benefit quite a bit from what you have to share, because Unilever as an organization has been very strategic on the gender equality agenda. You've, as a group of companies, set targets and driven action. Can I ask you, why was it important for Unilever to recognize this as a space that they want to work in and focus on?
Yep, absolutely. We should always start with the why. So thanks again for having me on the panel, and I am very passionate about this topic, so it's really a pleasure to be here and talk about it. There are 3 reasons that I can articulate why we embarked as Unilever on this journey. One, let me start with the most selfish reason, why it makes business sense to Unilever. We are a multinational company, which is a fast-moving consumer goods company, and women are actually behind 77% of our sales, and they pretty much account for most of our growing categories are because women are our consumers. We really depend on women for being shoppers and for being consumers and for being the people that we speak to when we advertise. Sarah talked about all these statistics about how women add to the economy, etc. And Unilever has realized that because a large part of our consumer base is women, it makes business sense to have an organization that has women so that we can create products and market products and sell products to women. So that's the first reason, because it makes business sense as a consumer goods company to be invested in diversity. Now, let me come to some more unselfish reasons. As many of you know, Unilever has a very sustainable view on business, and we have something called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, a big part of which, there's many kinds of agendas around environment, health and well-being, and equity and diversity and inclusion. And we really believe that a sustainable way to do business is by doing good for the world. And one of those pillars of our sustainability agenda is actually the diversity and inclusion agenda, because we believe in a more equitable world. 70% of everybody who's living in poverty around the world are women. 70% of people below poverty line around the world are women. And women only own 1% of the world's property. I was also listening to the stats that Sarah was sharing, and there's enough and more data to tell us that we need to do something about helping women come up to the same equal place as men and as they deserve. So that's the second reason. It's because we believe that the world will be better when it's equitable, and Unilever really wants to be a beacon of a winning leader in equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's the second reason, because it's good for the world. So first was because it's good for the business, second is because it's good for the world, and the third is we realize that as we hire more women into our workforce, our culture changes. And there are enough studies to prove that when you have a gender diverse team or an organization, you actually have a more diverse thinking process, a more innovative outcome, a more safe culture, psychologically safe culture. So there are many benefits that we have experienced as we have over the years increased the women in our workforce, and that has positively impacted our culture to be more engaged, to be more psychologically safe, to be more trusting, to be more innovative, and the list goes on. Those are the three reasons why Unilever embarked on this journey, and we are reaping the benefits of being on this journey. Closer home in Unilever Sri Lanka, we have 55% of our country board as women. Our chairperson is a woman. And in our management cadre, we have 40% women. So we're inching towards a balanced workforce. And, even in our extended teams, this year, for the first time ever, we've hired women on our shop floor in our factory at Horana, where we've hired 25 women who are running an entire soap line on their own. And I just met them yesterday, and it's so proud to see women on the factory shop floor, which is such a male-dominated industry. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's why we started it, because it's good for our business, it's good for the world, and it's good for our culture.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Ananya. That was so clear. And thank you for sharing the impact that you've seen by making the change. Can I ask you, when Unilever drives this agenda, how did the organization decide what is important, what specifics would work, and what have you seen in terms of action that has been really impactful?
Yeah, great question. I think we've had a lot of learnings along the way, and I always say that there is the hardware of any change, and then there's the software. So at Unilever Sri Lanka, we've identified a very a unique diversity and inclusion framework, which we call the Belong Wheel, which has 5 pillars. Belong, BELONG, where B stands for Brilliant Basics, which is all kinds of progressive policies for diversity and inclusion. E stands for Evolving Gender, which is what we're talking about today. L stands for leadership, which is, some of the stuff that Sarah mentioned around education and awareness. O stands for focusing on other diverse groups like differently abled employees. And N stands for nation, so external partnerships, for example, with IFC. G stands for governance, which is really having a streamlined framework for making sure you're making progress on this agenda. So that's our 5-pronged diversity and inclusion strategy, just sharing very openly. It's called the Belong Wheel. And I think let me talk a bit about the hardware of this Belong Wheel, which is the policies, the targets. In order to make sure that gender is not something that is just, nice to talk about, we did embark on a journey many years ago to set a target. We said to ourselves that we're going to be 50-50 across the world, Unilever global level, in our management cadre. I think it was about 10 years ago, and in 10 years, we actually met the target. And I really believe that as basic as it sounds, setting a target, setting an intention, and driving the commitment of everybody, right from the leadership to the extended organization, to meet those targets is something that has got us here. Because once you have a critical mass of women, the journey becomes much easier. So the first few women, if an organization is at the start of their diversity journey, the first few women are always harder to hire. And then once you have a critical mass, it just becomes easier. So I think targets have played a very positive role in our journey of achieving gender balance. And, targets are not just for the sake of it. We're a very meritocratic organization. We basically believe in balanced slates. So when you're recruiting, we are saying that it's not that you have to hire a woman, it's that you have to have a balanced shortlist. So if you have 10 people shortlisted, 5 should be women, 5 should be men, and then may the best person win. That's our approach, is to have really balanced slates, and which is why it's so important to invest early on in ensuring women are getting the right skills and exposure to join the workforce. So that's a bit on the targets. A little bit more on policies that I think I can share is we have a lot of the stuff that Sarah spoke about at the start. Specifically in Unilever Sri Lanka this year, we've launched many things like domestic violence support. During the pandemic, females have been disproportionately affected, and it has led to an increase in domestic violence. So we've launched a domestic violence support policy, which really provides additional paid annual leave, financial support, flexible working arrangements, additional counseling, etc. We've also launched a fertility support policy, because we know a lot of working women are either delaying parenthood or just want the choice to do it later, and some who are facing challenges, we're supporting them on their journey to become mothers when they want. So fertility support is another thing we've launched. We do have very, very nice childcare policies. We have a 6-month maternity leave. We have a paternity leave. We have a creche in the office. We have agile working, in which you can flex your hours. We have part-time working. We have all kinds of work arrangements to support the flexibility that is needed by a woman. And we also offer career break opportunities. So, for women who may have children, or they want to study further, or they have caregiving responsibilities for their parents, or even men for that matter. I myself, by the way, have taken a career break for just self-discovery. So I think for me, the best thing that an organization can do, apart from putting the hardware in place, which is the policies and the targets, is to actually put the software in place, which is the culture. So we do a lot as Unilever to ensure that we create a psychologically safe workplace where people can be themselves, and then it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a woman or a man, or differently abled person, QI, it's all kinds of diversity should be able to thrive. And so we put a lot of emphasis on training, inclusion training, unconscious bias training, sensitizing leadership towards their biases when they're appointing talent. We have specific programs to groom women for senior leadership roles because, like Sarah said, there is a confidence issue, and I myself in my career journey have had a confidence, worked through my confidence to get to where I am. And so there's a lot of training and leadership development support that we provide to women to help them thrive. So that's some of the highlights of the software and the hardware at Unilever when it comes to how we enable diversity.
That was incredible. Thank you. Incredible and so very inspiring to hear everything that Unilever is doing. And I'm glad you touched on that last piece of culture. The fact that when we do look at specifically making our workplaces more inclusive for, it could be, let's say, gender as a starting point, but it opens it up for different types of diversity. And what we've also seen is that when we bring in family-friendly policies, so even at MAS, flexi work or paternity leave, it helps men and women both. It makes everyone feel more comfortable to be their authentic selves. So it's not really only for women, but yeah, for people who are just different to be able to contribute. Thank you, Ananya, thanks. I have so many more questions to ask you, but I'll get back to you once I speak with Swati. Thanks for that. Swati, I'm gonna move on to you very quickly. Thank you so much for being here. So like with the others, I'm going to ask you first for DEMO, being one of Sri Lanka's leading diversified conglomerates. People sometimes think, Unilever is a global company with a very different staff, maybe. For DEMO, could you tell us why it was important to look at gender equality as a strategic piece of work? Swati, are you able to hear me? Sarah and Ananya, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Hi, Swati. I think Swati might be having a bit of a connectivity issue. I'll give her. Hi.
Sorry about that. There was a connection issue.
You're back and we can hear you. Did you hear my question?
Halfway. Can you repeat it, please?
Yes, of course. So for DEMO, if you could tell us why, being in the industries that you're in, why was it important to look at gender equality as a strategic piece of work?
Okay. Thanks, Tanuja, for inviting me to be a part of this panel, first of all. So to start off with, today, DEMO stands as a diversified conglomerate operating in over 15 business sectors, right? But given our roots in engineering and automobile, DEMO was stereotyped ahistorically as an organization that's operating in a male-dominant industry. So this stereotype actually, led to or resulted in a low representation of women in the workforce. But we firmly believe that we cannot ignore 50% of our potential talent and 50% of our customers who are women. So we were conscious about the opportunities DEMO was losing out on because of this stereotype that exists. So as an organization that prioritizes equal opportunity and meritocracy, we took it on us. We took it as our responsibility to remove biases and stereotypes that's hugged to women in non-conventional job roles. So we wanted to change this amongst ourselves and in the community. we wanted to reiterate the fact that, you know, one cannot determine or judge another individual's interest, skills, or competencies based on their gender. So that was our take on, you know, the whole gender agenda, and this is why we actively, you know, took steps to bridge the gender gap.
Thanks. Thank you, Swati. Can I ask you, I've heard you speak on different panels about some really interesting action that you all took in your industry to not only encourage more women to join the workforce, but to retain them and to support them to take on leadership roles. If you could share some of the practical things that helped and some of the action that you took as a company to do this.
Sure. So when you look at, you know, increasing participation of women in automobile after sales solutions, one of the first steps that we took was using DEMO's Automobile Vocational Training Institute, which is called DATS. So DATS was launched as a CSR project in affiliation with Daimler Germany, the mother company, parent company for Mercedes-Benz, where we offer free education, automobile vocational education to underprivileged kids around Sri Lanka. And so back in 2013, we enrolled a batch of completely just women, females who were enthusiastic about, you know, learning about automobile. And we provided training for these ladies and groomed them to take up local and international occupations in the field of automobile after sales as mechanics, technicians, auto electricians, etc. So to attract women for this program, we carry out island-wide campaigns, awareness campaigns, focusing on schools and women in STEM. So on the other hand, we have women in engineering. So to strengthen that pool and to attract more women into the cadre, we built a talent pipeline of women in engineering by partnering with local associations such as Women in Engineering and strengthening our partnerships with universities offering, you know, STEM programs like engineering degrees. And we built a talent database and made it available to like our managers who are heading engineering businesses to select competent women in engineering. So these are some of the key, you know, initiatives that we have carried out in terms of attracting women. And I'd also like to speak about sustaining. Okay, now you've attracted them. How do you keep them with you? So in terms of sustaining or retaining these talent, our focus area was creating a conducive work environment and consciously providing, you know, opportunities for their growth, personally and professionally. Initially, when we were onboarding women in the automobile after sales field, we carried out comprehensive gender sensitization training programs where, you know, we wanted to normalize the fact that, okay, you're going to have more women join you who look like you, who wear your same overalls, and, you know, who will be working along with you on vehicles, repairing vehicles. So we wanted to normalize that fact. And not make it look like, you know, a fascination or an amusement to the existing employees which was, you know, male dominant. Then in 2018, we launched an employee resource group, which is a platform to amplify our dialogue around equal opportunity, meritocracy, and also mutual respect at work. So we got the management committee, you know, the leaders of DEMO to also be a part of these meetings where we addressed our employees cluster-wise and got our leaders to reinforce the importance of equality and inclusion at work. Most importantly, we exercise an open door policy, which gives the independence to any employee you know, to seek support or to seek redress for a grievance that they have from anyone in the organization in any level of authority. So it could be the direct supervisor, a skip level manager, to any of the directors, the head of HR, CEO, or chairman. And also, we have a very strong harassment and retaliation policy, which does not just protect our employees from, the harassment or any kind of discriminatory behavior that happens within the workplace, but it also protects our employees from third-party harassment, like, external stakeholders as well. And to add to it, we consistently create awareness on these topics, the different spectrum of diversity and inclusion, using a lot of platforms, like be it, emails, be it poster campaigns, or, encouraging our leaders to speak about the importance of equal opportunity, having more, women in the workforce, having, other underrepresented minorities in our workforce at a lot of forums where they address employees. So that is in terms of, promoting that. Those are some of the things that we do in terms of promoting a conducive work environment. And then when it comes to pushing or consciously encouraging that growth within the organization, our performance management and promotion nomination processes are very objective and independent, which operates using quantitative prerequisites. For example, all the nominations we get for promotions, all these employees go through an online cognitive and personality assessment, which is an AI-based artificial intelligence-based system, and it has quantitative prerequisites entered into it. So it generates results as they sit for these assessments, and we make sure that people who meet or exceed that average are the ones who are then groomed into taking up leadership positions in the workplace. And also, so this is something that we consciously have been following and have been building on to eliminate any kind of biases, personal biases in the process of performance management or promotion. And also, if you look at promotion policy, it clearly states as a criteria that you cannot discriminate anyone based on their gender, race, age, etc. And in addition to that, we also have identified people as high potential individuals within the organization-wide. So these are individuals who have the potential to take up leadership positions in the next 2 to 3 years. So we identify those individuals and provide customized series of training programs to further enhance their skills and competencies so that they become ready to take up these high-level responsibilities in the near future. So these are some of the very practical initiatives that we have taken, focusing on building a more diverse and inclusive workforce.
Swati, thank you so much for that. And it's really encouraging because I think, like you said, in certain industries and job families where we see, we perceive them to be more male-dominated or female-dominated even, companies quite often feel like, oh, there's nothing we can do about this. It's a social, historical, cultural thing. But it's always really encouraging when companies go out there and, like you said, because it makes sense for you, because you're losing out on the talent pool otherwise, for companies to have taken such proactive steps, it's really, really encouraging. Thanks, Swati, for that. And I think we have another poll coming up for our participants, and I would like to continue the conversation, but if you could put up the poll, we can let everyone vote and then carry on with the conversation. So while you all respond on the poll, I'm gonna go back to our panelists, and I have a question for all three of you actually. And I know you'll have so many things to say here, but it's about when you do this work, when you're looking to actively increase representation of women in your cadre, when you're looking at target setting and driving this agenda, there are so many challenges that you would have met. If I can just ask all three of you, if you could mention one challenge and something that you did to overcome. I will start with Sarah, based on what you would have seen over the years in the different jurisdictions you've worked in, and then of course I'll ask Ananya and Swati to jump in. You can see the results of the poll. This is very interesting. We'll take that up in the questions section, I think. Sarah, if I can ask you, challenges you've seen that companies face, and maybe things that work to overcome those challenges?
Sure. I mean, I think there are many, and I'm sure that Ananya and Swati will talk about some of the ones they've experienced. I think one of the things that we often see with companies who want to do something is they don't know what to do and they don't know where to start. And so, I think, we have a big toolkit of things that we advise companies that they can do. But often one of the first things that companies can do is to just take a bit of a pulse of where their organization is. So, do a bit of an internal review of where are your women and men in the organization? What grade levels are they at? Which types of job roles are they in? Have a look at your attrition pipeline. Where are women falling out of that? Do they get to a certain grade and then they leave or they exit? So understanding your workplace dynamics from an HR data perspective is really, really important, but also understanding your workplace dynamics in terms of employee perceptions and what your employees want is also critical. So often we see companies will start by doing an employee survey to take a bit of a pulse of how do their employees feel about their opportunities. You can disaggregate this by women and men, so you can start to get a sense of, do women feel differently about their opportunities in the workplace, about their opportunities to be hired or promoted? You can also then ask questions about things like, childcare. Do they have particular childcare needs that they're struggling with? So I would say, if companies are thinking about where do I start, very often a good place to start is to just do a bit of an internal diagnostic and an internal assessment of where you are right now. And then that will tell you where you should prioritize.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Ananya, I'm going to ask you, you must have faced so many challenges. Anything that really worked to sort of reverse some of the challenges?
Yeah, I think like Sarah said, there are many challenges. And I think the one I would like to call out is that, when you're trying to work on bringing gender balance in the organization, it has to be bought in by everybody, because otherwise it may feel like a checkbox exercise. And what happens is that in the context of the diversity of gender, men tend to feel like something wrong is happening, and male lives matter too. Just as women lives matter, male lives matter. And so I think the biggest challenge has been to help everybody buy into why this is a focus area and why this matters, and everyone truly believing in it. Because this is not something that HR drives, right? Every leader is recruiting for their team. Every leader is working day in and day out, which may be leading to attrition from their team. Every leader is behaving in a way that is either leading to a certain kind of culture or not, where women thrive or not. So at every step of the way, right from recruitment to engagement to exit, everybody is having an impact on the ambiance that is being created for women to thrive. So unless if everybody is truly bought into the fact that this makes business sense, this makes world sense, I think it's going to continue to be an issue. And like I said at the beginning, at Unilever, we're very clear that we're doing this in a very meritocratic way, which is why you'll never find somebody being appointed just because they're a woman. All things being equal, if there's literally two people exactly the same with same qualifications, same everything, then you would probably hire the woman. But other than that, we always go, for the best candidate. So I think the challenge is to get everybody coming on the journey. And I think one of the learnings is that we have something that we recently launched called the High Support, High Challenge framework, in which we're teaching all our leaders, all of us, to strike the right balance between a high support approach, which is more empathetic, compassionate, really understanding, providing all the support you can, and a high challenge approach, which is really pushing people to be their best selves, setting a very stretched ambition, setting very clear goals, and really pushing the envelope for individuals and teams. And we believe that this high support, high challenge framework is the right framework to overcome this bias against, oh, now is the organization only compassionate because there are so many women, and are you going on this end of the spectrum of kind of being too soft? So this is the right balance that we have found that also helps drive performance. And at the same time, create the level of inclusion and psychological safety that is needed for everybody to thrive, whether be it man, woman, or any kind of diversity. So yeah, I think that's what I would say has been the challenge and one of the big learnings.
Thank you. Thanks, Ananya. Swati, I'm sure you would have many challenges, but if you could mention one and something you did to maybe overcome.
Sure. So I completely agree with Sarah and Ananya as well. Like the challenges were mutual to us too, like in terms of creating a culture change through gender sensitization programs and a lot of unconscious bias trainings. And something else that I want to mention is that the challenge of, again, attracting women, that was one of the key challenges that we faced, because we're talking about women in unconventional roles, right? Because still it's very prevalent that our society puts women and men in boxes even now. There are lots of gendered roles out there. So what we did actively to sort of go out there and remove that is by strengthening again our associations and networking with local networks that support women in STEM, and also to reach out to more universities and educational institutes that provide training for women in STEM, in engineering, be it engineering, or we also have like other elements coming in now, like chemical, like with our chemical business, and also like our IT expanding. So we're really looking at forging new partnerships and strengthening the prevalent ones. And by doing this, we've definitely seen some positive changes. Like we've had a 15% increase in women in STEM, women in unconventional roles within the past year, and we've had 5% increase in women in leadership roles within just a year. And we've also been able to increase the recruitment of women in non-conventional roles from 7% to 11%. Not just that, we have women, leading some of our engineering businesses, being in the forefront. And our managers also feel that having more women in the workforce has increased the retention of customers and strengthened productive stakeholder interactions, leading to, at the end, contributing to business efficiency and success overall. So yeah, that is one of our key challenges. And something that I'd like to say is that, when you really focus on, increasing women's participation, and especially women in unconventional roles, you cannot go into it expecting things to change overnight or over a course of 1 year or 2 years. You really have to buckle up and be ready to continuously, persistently, go out there, create the dialogue, create awareness, strengthen partnerships, and set ambitious targets to see real change.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much, Swati, for that. In the interest of time, I have so many more questions for the panel, but I'm now going to open up for our audience. I don't see any questions on the chat box, but if any of you have questions, please do type it in the chat box, or if any of the other administrators can see questions, please do share them. You have a few minutes to put your questions on the chat box. And also the results from the poll are very, very interesting. I'm looking at them, and a lot of our companies on the discussion today have really marked building a respectful and supportive workplace as one of the things that most of them are doing. So I think that's addressing anti-harassment and equal opportunity. Recruiting % who've responded saying they're doing that kind of work, which is really, really interesting. I hope some of what our panelists spoke of today will be helpful in terms of things that you might also want to add on to the work that you're doing. Employer-supported childcare, we've got a small percentage of people who marked it as something you're working on. That's a difficult area. I know this as an organization that's working on employer-supported childcare. There are so many different dimensions to it, and every step you take in that direction is really helpful. And I know the IFC has some great advice in that space and has done a lot of work and has supported us at MAS as well in that creche and childcare support space. Any questions from the audience? If not, I think we're almost at time. But just before we wrap up, if I might ask Sarah, I know because we've been talking about a focused effort in terms of women in the workplace, and we've got some really, really great examples of work that you've done. Oh, and we've got a question on the chat box. Can the panelists talk about any failures that they may have experienced in furthering the agenda? Ananya, I'm going to go directly to you. Can you think of anything you'd call a hiccup or a failure, and anything that comes to mind?
Maybe I'll just take a couple of reflections here. I mean, some of the things we've seen companies try that haven't worked, maybe rather than failure that they've learned from, is, and this is particularly true when we're thinking about women in non-traditional jobs, or when you're bringing women into a space where there previously haven't been any, is we have seen sometimes that companies just bring in one woman. So, for example, we worked with a company, an agribusiness manufacturing company, and they really wanted to get women driving their forklifts. And so initially what they did was they just trained up one woman and they set her in there with all the other blokes who were driving the forklifts, which of course was a complete disaster because she felt uncomfortable. The guys didn't want her there. She didn't have the kinds of support structures that Sawaki had been talking about. They hadn't made sure that she had the right equipment. And so the intention was the right one, but the execution just hadn't been fully thought out. And so what the company then did was they went away and they trained up 10 female forklift drivers, and they put at least 3 women on each of the shifts. So then there was a group of women who could be there, you know, to support each other, but also to create some, you know, some meaningful change in terms of the culture and the environment. And then they also supported all the other aspects around them, like the correct PPE, like having a women's washroom, you know, like having the machinery set up in a way that they could operate. So I would say there's, you know, there's always often an opportunity to learn when you try something and it doesn't quite work. It's not a reason to give up. It's just a reason to reformulate it and try it a different way.
Thanks, Sarah. Ananya,
yeah, I think. Yeah, just to add, actually what Sarah said really resonated, because this is the reason why we went from 0 women in our factory to together hiring 25 of them, because when you hire them together, they have each other. But you know, the failure or, you know, something that we've learned along the way that I thought I could share is that, you know, very often we've hired women into a role, even if it's a conventional role. And the leader of the team might, you know, go back saying this was the wrong hire and that, you know, the lady is not able to cope with what the job is. What we realized over the years is that apart from the generic training that many of our organizations are doing, I heard Swati also talk about it on unconscious bias, inclusion, and all of that. I think you need a focused awareness for each of the leader to assess their own inclusion and biases. So we launched this thing called the Inclusion Index, and there was an external partner called Symmetra, who partnered with us on this journey, where a lot of our senior leaders were put through this questionnaire that they had to send to their teams and do a self-assessment, and it was a proper psychometric just based on inclusion, which helped them see their blind spots. And that was a real game changer. And this was when I was in my previous role in supply chain, which, as we know, is a pretty male-dominated function. When you are able to showcase those blind spots to leaders, you automatically end up creating, waking them up to the reality that they have to enable the women to be successful. So that is one, I think, learning that we've had along the way, that it's not just generic trainings, it's each individual has to be have almost like a moment of enlightenment around this topic of inclusion.
That's really great advice, Ananya. Thank you for that. Swati, anything to add?
Yes, so not exactly like a failure like you mentioned before, but a hiccup definitely in terms of childcare, in terms of promoting or having more concrete initiatives around childcare. So we do have like parental leave. We do offer maternity, paternity, and adoption leave, and we do offer, lactation breaks. But in terms of infrastructure, we've not been able to invest on a creche or anything, solely because it was not the most practical option for us. Given our given our 10% representation of women that who are also spread quite very much around the country, it didn't make sense for us to have a centralized location as a creche or like even a preschool or whatever. So again, this is because it's like, what we learned is that we cannot have everything. Sometimes, it really depends on how we customize our practices to suit our context. So we're working on this. We are looking forward to, run a survey on the employees' demand or employees' need for childcare. Of course, with our partnership with IFC, the She Works, we've had a lot of learning in this area, and we're looking forward to put them all in place as well, one by one. So we want to identify how we can customize this, providing childcare support for our employees, but it has definitely been challenging for us. So that's something I think that I wanted to share.
Thanks, Swati. Thank you for sharing those. I can relate to what all of you said. We are out of time, unfortunately, but we have two questions on the chat box, which I think the panelists did answer in the sense there's a question on recruiting females into male-dominated roles. And Swati, I think you really got into that and shared a lot of insight into specific things that DEMO did, from connecting with professional bodies, universities, actively going out there recruiting. And Ananya spoke of equal CVs being presented for interviews. We also, so a lot of really practical advice from all of you, action that has been taken by companies, which I am sure will help all of us on the discussion today, maybe to think of something new, take one step that could help us. It really, I'm taking copious notes because in this journey, it's you always feel like you're struggling. No matter what you do, it's not enough. You're not moving the needle fast enough. It can be frustrating. But there are so many things that came out of the conversation today, from interview panels to actively recruiting to dealing with unconscious bias. And Ananya, what you specifically said about each leader being able to recognize his or her own biases, which I think is a huge part of this work. So having a framework, having organizations like IFC also support you to measure and track yourself. That's something all of us on the call have experienced, and it's been helpful because sometimes you're doing a lot of work, but measuring yourselves maybe annually, looking at where your numbers are at, looking at where your job roles are at, that becomes really helpful. So thank you for some really incredible insight. And as we wrap up, if I could just ask Sarah to share, I know the IFC is driving another network to look at other types of underrepresented groups. And if you could maybe just share a few words. I know Arjuna's here to wrap up, and thank you because we've had you over time now. But Sarah, if you could just share a few words on the network that you're driving.
Thanks so much, Tanuja. So one of the things that we are looking to do is to broaden our focus beyond just diversity from a gender perspective, and to really look at what are some of the aspects of diversity that are really fundamental to successful businesses. And so we've launched a new campaign called the Together We Plus campaign, where we'll be working with Sri Lankan businesses to address issues around people with disabilities, and also sexual orientation and gender identity minorities. So really looking in a similar way to what we've been doing with firms around gender inclusion, is looking to see what can companies do to start to better recruit and retain people in these communities. How can they better serve these communities as customers? Because of course, these are significant potential customer markets. And so we'll be working with some of the companies on this call and with others to really start to push the agenda to that next step as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, Swati, and Ananya, for a fantastic conversation. Hopefully, we'll hear from you again on many other forums. I'll now hand over to Arjuna to wrap things up.
Thank you very much. Well, that was an exciting event, and I thought Sarah, Ananya, and Swati, that came out of passion, and we really enjoyed having that experience with our participants on the call. And Tanuja, really great moderating with your expertise on this subject. So it was enjoyable, and I think all of you have made a difference in this area that we are speaking on, diversity and inclusion. And really those insights and strategies that you shared will help some of the participants, especially the leaders and who are in these influential pillars, to make a difference in our society and our organizations. I'd like to thank Roshani and the committee for providing this space for us to run this program, and especially Manori, who actually did a lot of work behind the scene to get this up to this stage and have this very enriched series going on the diversity and inclusion. I'd like to also thank the tech teams, the PR companies, and everybody who's covering this event on backstage for making sure that everything ran smoothly, including the polls and the videos. So thank you very much for all your participants who joined us today. It has been a very pleasant experience having such a large number of participants actively engaged, asking questions. We do like to continue this series and build it on to various different aspects as a broader topic of diversity and inclusion going forward once we complete gender as a complete topic. So do stay tuned with us. So I'm going to sign off and wish you all the best. If you do wish to join and engage with CBB, Diniti will share a few links and make sure that you can get to know more about CBB as a council, what we do, and how you can get your organizations to make use of our initiatives to shape in your strategies going forward. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.